Hello everyone, I'm Steve Savant, syndicated financial columnist and money color commentator. On today's show, the timeline for college planning, part 5 of our series on college funding with Brock Jolly, the college funding coach. Welcome to our 5th segment, Brock.
Thanks, Steve. Great to be back.
Okay, Brock, there's a timeline to this. I'm a chronology guy, right? I like timeline. The human experience isn't multidimensional. It's pretty much on a line going forward. When you're talking about timeline thinking, give me what you're trying to convey to the consumer so that he starts thinking in the same kind of chronology like you do.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, when we first started teaching this class, it was mainly parents of high school juniors and seniors. I mentioned earlier, deer in headlights, right? And they came in and it was, wow, I never realized college was this expensive, and I've got my money in retirement plans, and I've got my money in my home equity. How am I going to pay for my child's college education or my children's college education? And the advice we always received was, I wish I had known this information when I had little kids. They said, you ought to go teach this information at the elementary schools. So we did that. And the feedback was, almost unanimous. They said, hey, great information. But you know what, Brock, I've got a 5th grader, right? I got plenty of time. And I'd always have to say, go talk to your neighbor who has the junior or senior and ask them if you've got plenty of time. Right, there's a great book out there called 1,001 Ways to Pay for College. And one of the jokes I always have is, look, if you wait until junior or senior year of high school, there are no longer 1,001 ways to pay for college. I mean, there are like 4. Right? And I kind of kid about that, but it is reality. The sooner you start on anything like this, the more flexibility you've got, the more options you've got.
All right, now you do college funding seminars all over. You have you and your team, you're everywhere. When you're sitting down, are you getting parents of grade school attendee at that level looking at this already?
Well, it's interesting because it's sort of, at one end you've got the sense of urgency, and at the other end you've got time, right? Good news, bad news. For the parent of the elementary school, good news is that you've got time. But guess what? The bad news, Steve, is you've got time. And what I mean by that is college is not getting any less expensive. So the sooner you start on this, right? The key is you look at these prices, you look at the cost of education, and for a lot of families, it's okay, I'm going to stick my head in the sand, cross my fingers, and hope it works out. Hope is not a strategy, right? The key is to do something, understand where you are, draw that line in the sand, and understand, okay, maybe I can't solve it all right now, but I can do something.
All right, now, so let's say, let's do our emergency people, right?
Right, sure.
Okay, Gen X, Gen Y. I'm in my 40s and 50, and I didn't really plan for this. My kid's a senior in high school. And you just said the huge thing, in my view, my 101 ways or whatever.
1,001 ways.
1,001 ways just got down to about 4.
Right.
So there's a diminishing return on the timeline. I'd love you to do a timeline on that.
Yeah.
That would be a great slide.
Well, so real quickly, just as an example, I mean, worst case scenario, let's say you haven't saved a dime and your kids are going off to college. Maybe you take out student loans that today are at pretty attractive interest rates, but here's your strategy. Create a strategy to repay those student loans so that 3, 4, 5 years down the line, you're ready to repay them. Maybe that involves the kids repaying them. But the key, again, create a strategy around it.
How hard is it to do these things on for a normal person? Let's say he's willing. The kid's 5 and he's willing to actually do something about it. Pretty good at lay down some basic strategies they can do.
Totally.
So I love that.
Right, and the key is, again, it's time value money. You don't have to set aside as much money to be able to do it.
Okay, so if I'm looking at different reasons I want to get rid of I'm trying to get rid of retirement in my future because most people are sitting there going, this is the biggest bump. Listen, I got married. My biggest bump when I first got married, the down payment for a house.
That's right.
It was huge. Down payments for cars, couldn't just buy them cash, right? So I already had little bumps that I had to get used to, and then all of a sudden I see college coming up, and I had a 10-year look at this.
Yep.
And I'm like, what am I going to do? I'm 10 years out, and I'm still not really, where am I going to put my money? And so I didn't do retirement until way into my late 30s, early 40s.
Right.
Because, I'm looking at the other.
Right.
So how do I do this? I have competing plans.
It's always that balancing act, right? And we talked in one of the earlier segments about, it's taking care of mom and dad in some cases. It's paying for the house. It's, all these different things that may be stressful on your overall finances, right? And how do you manage that? How do you save and pay for college and still retire one day.
Okay, so when your team is together, though, they're addressing both then.
That's right.
They're doing college planning and retirement.
I say all the time, you can't plan in a vacuum because college has gotten so expensive. It used to be, here was my college fund, here was my new home fund, here was the retirement. You can't do it anymore. You've got to have a strategy that looks at the flexibility, looks at tax implications, looks at risk tolerance to be able to identify. Because the key is when your child's going to college, it doesn't matter if your money's in a 529, in a bank account, in a Coverdell, or in cash under the mattress, right? The colleges just want the money, right? They don't care where it comes from. And the key, again, create a strategy around it. Start early, start often, keep doing it, be consistent about it, et cetera.
All right, so when you're out with your group, you're doing comprehensive financial planning. Your team they're not just focusing on their expertise in college funding itself. They're looking at this as an overall plan.
Big picture, absolutely.
All right. So now I'm ready to do the big picture. And in your experience going into grade schools where you're going to now, what kind of obstacles and how have you been overcoming? So in other words, I bring you an obstacle. I'm a parent. I have 4 children. My first one's a senior this year. I have another one that's a sophomore. I have another one that's 8th grade. I have another one that's 6th grade.
Right.
I mean, there's people like this.
Sure, absolutely.
And they're going, how am I going to do this?
Right.
How do you bring a person to give them hope again?
Yeah, well, and look, there's some challenges, right? I mean, you know, for some families, we said earlier, there's no silver bullet. There's no one size fits all. But the key is draw that line in the sand. A family like that, right? We might create a strategy to say, how do we get multiple kids in school simultaneously? Because believe it or not, if you've got multiple kids in school simultaneously, you may actually be eligible for more need-based aid as a result. Most families don't understand that. So again, looking at the big picture to say, how do we do this? Well, how do you get kids in school simultaneously? Maybe one of your children takes a gap year, a year between high school and college, where they go do some educational experience. Maybe they live internationally. All kinds of really cool options that may help from a financial perspective.
Okay, if somebody's watching this show today, you got a pretty easy data collector for them to fill out.
Oh, yeah.
And they'd be able to say, I'm not filling out an app for any of the colleges. I'm just doing a data for you.
Because that's the key. It's sort of like going to a doctor, right? The doctor's going to ask you lots of questions. We want to understand, where are you today? That's the only thing that we know definitively. Once we've got all that information, then we can say, hey, what if you did this? Why are you doing this? Tell me about this. And really, really try to understand and customize a strategy with this family.
All right, so when I complete the data collector, that second part that you just mentioned sounds kind of pastoral. You kind of find out what are you trying to get done? Where are you trying to go?
We get deep, but we have fun doing it.
Okay, so you have quite a team here. And I'm sure this isn't everybody.
It's not everybody, but yeah.
But these are people that are doing their forte is public speaking in the college funding domain.
That's right.
This is what
so we do free workshops around the country where we sit down, we go through this. I mean, we'll fill high school, middle school, elementary, churches, synagogues, businesses, you name it, because it's this number one financial fear, right? Parents are scared to death about how they're going to do it. They want a strategy. They want solutions. So what we do is we do these workshops around the country where we'll come in, we'll provide this valuable information, totally free, because we want to educate, we want to provide value to these families.
Okay, so they're doing this as an educational issue. It's very altruistic. It's helping the public, no doubt about it. So in the end, when you're looking at this, how would you frame, if you had to frame if you wanted somebody to come in, they saw this video, they said, I want you to come in, how would they contact you?
I think reach out to us because we'd love it. I'm passionate about what I do. I've got a team of advisors around the country who are truly passionate about what they do. We'd love to do a workshop. We'd love to sit down with you on an individual basis and look at your situation. Again, I'll say it again, no silver bullet. The key is let's look at where you are today. Let's look at your children. Let's try to find the right fit. Let's figure out the strategies that will work for your family.
Brock, you have how many seminars? I have no idea.
Hundreds. We do about 500 of these workshops a year.
A year?
Yep.
All over the country?
All over the country.
Now, you're going to San Francisco from our recording,
right.
And you're talking to one of your top college funding teachers.
That's right.
She's excellent.
That's right.
Okay, to me, this is where you have men, women involved in this, people that understand that most of these people are parents.
Yeah, and we've curated a team of advisors who are excellent advisors and are part of that small minority who really understands the ins and outs of college funding that most advisors don't really understand.
Yeah, just made a big distinction. Okay, good. There are a lot of good financial advisors, but not many of them, their forte or their understanding on college funding.
That's absolutely right.
Wow. Well, I want to thank you, Brock, for being on our show and sharing the series on college funding. Huge. And remember, keep in mind, before moving forward with any of the ideas on our show, always check with your tax consultant, legal counsel. And if you're talking about college planning, check with Brock and his team. You've been watching Steve Savant's Money, the name of the game.